Condos, Florida, and rentals. What might I be talking about today? Many know that condos have had some changes over the past couple of years. One of those changes affects their budgets. Many condos have had an increase in their budget or an increase in their reserve requirements, or just insurance and cost of operations have gone up. When that's all put together, monthly fee has gone up. Some communities have kept that to a minimum. Other communities, because of requirements, could not. So throughout the state of Florida, many condos have increased 25, 50, 100% of what the budget was just 2 years ago. So how does that affect condos? Well, for condos, sometimes you have a more affordable entry point. Sometimes maybe it's a unique beachfront property, so it's not so much about the price. But now when you add on this HOA fee or condo association fee that previously was manageable, isn't manageable today. For some it is, for some it is not. So how does that affect an owner? Well, let's say I'm moving or I have a change of my needs and I no longer want to live in the condo. I want to sell the condo. Are there any buyers that are buying these condos today? And why not? Well, oftentimes when you add these condo fees in with the monthly payment, that's part of their qualification if they're getting a mortgage, or it's simply part of their budget. But when these fees start to get too high, what other options do they have? Well, now maybe I entertain the idea of a single family property, maybe I go to a townhome, or maybe I look at a different condo because this one fees were just more than I was comfortable with. So now your buyer market goes down. And of course today everybody knows our interest rates are quite high, which has already affected buyer volume across the state of Florida and in many states across the country. So how does this affect you as a condo owner? Well, if you've moved out of your condo and maybe you were prepared to take a couple of months to sell, what happens when those couple of months have passed by? What happens when you've lowered the price as much as you're prepared to, or as much as you can, and the condo is still vacant? And maybe you've only had a couple of showings. What options do you have? Well, this is where that rental piece comes into play. However, before I talk about the rentals, condos oftentimes have restrictions on rentals. Oftentimes it was because insurance had restrictions, or maybe it was mortgage requirements. Previously, mortgages would have a 20% restriction, where if more than 20% of the community was rented, it would not qualify for regular financing, which would eliminate VA, FHA, and conventional loans, meaning you'd have to find a specialty product. This specialty product often required a bigger down payment. Not everybody has those funds, so it did make sense. And in a shifting market, many lenders have allowed that percentage to be more. But what about the condo association? The condo association is there to keep structure within the community, to handle expenses within the community, and to make sure that everybody behaves. It has a great purpose. It is also there to help protect the community. The goal is to maintain a value, to maintain an appearance, and to keep the properties as sellable, as desirable, as a place people want to live. So what happens in a shifting market? Might the association have some responsibility in giving the owner some guidance as to what may be a wise adjustment? Well, what do I mean? What about your community? Have you looked to see how many homes are up for sale in your condo community right now? And how many condos are in your community? Well, if you take the total amount of condos and you take the total amount for sale, how much of your community is up for sale? Is it a small percentage? Is it a big percentage? Maybe check. How long have those units been on the market for sale? That's another important detail. And why do I ask these questions? Because what happens when the cost of holding a vacant condo becomes too expensive for one of the condo owners? What are their choices? If they've exceeded the rental capacity and they can't sell their condo and they no longer live there, what choice is available? There's not another option. So then what happens when their situation gets to a certain point where they can't afford the condo for one reason or another? What's going to happen? At some point, they're going to stop making that mortgage payment. They're going to stop making that HOA payment. The HOA will do some of the actions that they're allowed to do, but if the owner doesn't have the ability to pay those expenses, where are all those charges going to go? Well, eventually they're going to have to get absorbed back into the association, because the association budget is essentially an escrow account, meaning it's not for profit, it's just to cover the expenses of the community. So if this person doesn't pay, who's going to pay the cost? It's going to be everybody else. Well, now what happens when that condo owner and the bank finally says, hey, they're not going to pay the bill, we're going to have to take possession of the property? Well, now the bank starts paying the condo fee. That's great, right? Is the bank holding the property? And if the community has exceeded their rental volume, even if the bank wanted to hold the property, do they have the ability to rent? They don't. So what's the bank going to do? The bank's going to put it up for sale. And they're going to start at a number that is in line with the community and the condition of the unit. But unlike the seller, the bank doesn't have a bottom line. The bank has a process, but the bank doesn't have a bottom line. So if they start at this price and it sits for a month or two and there's no good activity, there's no good traction, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to lower the price. Well, what happens is that goes on for 6 months, for 12 months. Eventually, this price will get to a price where there's now a buyer that's willing to pay that price. And while one property in a neighborhood is considered an anomaly, what happens when the next person has to do that same process? Now there's a second HOA that's gone delinquent, and now there's a second foreclosure. If we remember 2006, we peaked. It took almost 6 years to bottom out, and condos felt that very much. The average real estate across the country dropped about 50%. However, for condos, in North Florida, a lot of condos dropped 50 to 75%, some even more than that, because they became unsellable. Now, there were different variables that came up, but the bottom line was eventually the bank lowered the price to a point where somebody was willing to pay. And once they hit that number, that's where the bank started selling the property. Now, if you think back to 2010, 2012, even 2014, when the vast majority of the market was foreclosures. A single foreclosure is an anomaly. But what happens when all of the sales are foreclosures? It's no longer an anomaly. It's now the only thing selling in your neighborhood. So how am I putting this all together? Well, ultimately, the association is there to help the owners of the association to maintain the community, to maintain the property, and to maintain value in their unit. So this question today comes specifically regarding maintaining a community the best you can while keeping structure and order, but opening up another option that also helps the owners in the property. How do we do that? Today, I encourage most condos throughout the state of Florida, if you're part of an association, review how many condos are for sale, review how many have sold this year, and look at your waiting list for who would like to put their condo up for rent. Look at some of those numbers. What trends do you see in your neighborhood? I'm not asking about the one next door. I'm not talking about the one on the other end of the state. I'm saying in your community specifically, where are your numbers? Have you exceeded your rental quantity? Do you have a waiting list that is an excessively long list? And do you have a lot of condos that are simply not selling? Maybe at your next meeting, it would be good to have the conversation. Do you have a property manager that manages a lot of units in your community, that brings in well-qualified renters that follow the rules of the community? Maybe invite them to the board meeting. If I'm close to your area, I would be happy to join your board meeting and talk about the pros and the cons so that you can make an educated decision. We're in a shifting market. There are lots of opinions that are out there, and the bottom line is we don't know. Might we see some things repeat like we did before? It's very possible. But we're in a very different place today than we were in 2006. So the only thing that we can say for certain is whatever's coming is going to be different. It's the only thing we can say for sure. But it doesn't mean there won't be some challenges. 2025, the primary sales are new construction. The primary sales are single family and townhomes. Condos have had a very tough year. Is next year going to be any better for condos? We don't know for sure. But at the moment, that high interest rate, those high condo fees are probably not going to be gone in a couple of months. So this is a problem that will be affecting the community possibly for years to come. So if you'd like to, give me a call. My name is Baron McWright with McWright Property Management. We would love to help you out in making an educated decision for your community.